10 years of Meghan Markle and fresh bullying allegations about the fake Duchess making their way into the public domain via Sarah Vine, star columnist of the Daily Mail, who has published this front cover article in You magazine, marking 10 years of Meghan Markle, a decade of drama, she says. And what is interesting about this is these anecdotes are maybe not the worst that you have heard, but they very much paint a picture of Meghan Markle being a bad guy before she entered the British royal family, and then even worse once she was inside the British royal family. And I remind everyone, I was the first to reveal that there was any consternation behind the scenes about Meghan Markle's behaviour, and the consternation was originally coming from Catherine, the Princess of Wales, and the late Queen Elizabeth II. And when you see the propagandists on woke ITV like Charlene White try and say, oh, well, they're all bullies, find me the evidence that the late Queen or Catherine, the Princess of Wales, ever treated any members of royal staff like this. So we're going to get into these key revelations from Sarah Vine, then get analysis with Brittany, editor of the Royal News Network. So Vine writes, when Soho House in Istanbul opened its doors in April 2015, an old friend of mine was thrilled to be invited to the celebrations. It was a glamorous weekend-long affair attended by celebrities such as Eddie Redmayne, Jamie Dornan, Sophie Ellis-Bextor, Claudia Winkleman, Paloma Faith, and more. There were lavish lunches and boat trips, and many of the invitees stayed in the new hotel, a beautifully restored palazzo. My friend recalls that at one point he was in the lobby when a very pretty American woman strode up to the front desk. She proceeded to berate the staff about some kind of problem in her room. My friend couldn't quite catch the details, but the general gist seemed to be that she was unhappy with the quality of her goodie bag, which she felt was insufficiently lavish in its largesse. My friend remembers thinking, wow, it takes quite some chutzpah to complain about a free gift at a free weekend in a 5-star hotel full of A-listers. At the time, he had no idea who the angry American was, nor, he recalls, did anyone else in his group. A year later, he saw a photograph of Prince Harry's new girlfriend, Meghan Markle, and recognised her immediately. The woman from Soho House, Istanbul. And Vine goes on to analyse, I've never forgotten that anecdote, because it always seems to me that given the way things turned out, it was pretty telling. In fact, in many ways, it reflects Meghan's attitude to the royal family as a whole. She was treated with generosity and kindness, offered all the trappings and the status, but somehow none of it was ever quite enough. And I got thinking about this too, because remember, I was covering Meghan Markle right back at that time. And also I had an interesting lens because my history was in the entertainment industry. And I very much remember speaking to one of Meghan Markle's directors telling me, Dan, even before she met Prince Harry, she was the biggest nightmare of an actress I ever worked with. Demands for first-class flights that didn't exist, Brittany. Some of these routes didn't exist. Like, there are no first-class flights between Europe, like the Europe mainland and London. And she was demanding first-class flights. And when the travel people said to her, look, there are no first-class flights on these routes. There's a business-class flight. There's no first-class flight. She said, okay, you're going to have to get me a private jet then. This was on a relatively low-budget B movie. But Sarah Vine wasn't done there, because she went on writing, one thing is certain. Meghan is not one to allow herself to be shortchanged. If someone displeases her, they sure know about it. I was once told, this time by a friend with contacts in the royal household, and by the way, a little bit of a connection here, just in case you don't know who Sarah Vine is. She was married to Michael Gove, now the editor of The Spectator, but at the time of Harry and Meghan's time within the royal family, one of the most senior politicians in the land. And Sarah Vine actually walked in to a state dinner alongside Rose Cholmondeley, a friend of Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales. So Sarah Vine is not talking out her ass when she talks about contacts in the royal household, if you get what I mean. Anyway, back to what she was told. One day, she says, and this story horrifies me because I am 100% convinced it is true. One day, the Duchess was interviewing for staff. A young girl, a perfectly harmless and nervous Sloane in her early 20s, a Sloane, that means a bit of a posho Londoner, was ushered into her presence. Meghan was sitting at her desk, reading some papers. For what seemed like an eternity, she kept her eyes down, ignoring the girl completely. Then she glanced up, examined her, then went back to her work. She uttered 3 words at that point. You can leave. That is that. And you've got to expect that that is the type of behaviour that all of Meghan's staff had to deal with. And what's interesting to me is a lot of people talk about Meghan's bullying of junior staff members, right? The PAs, the people who are coming in for the job interviews. And of course, that is much more appalling because these are young people on young salaries who are trying to get ahead in life. You know, the royal family does not pay a lot of money, but it is a good place to learn. It's a great place for connections. And there are, of course, perks to the job, and you're part of history. But it wasn't just the junior staff that Meghan would treat like that. It was also very senior staff members. And some of these people who Meghan was bullying to the point of tears and total dissolution with their life were highly experienced, very tough people. So the fact that she would treat juniors like that, just a woman in for a job interview, is completely nuts. But this was something that I guess was just so commonplace to her. Sarah Vine goes on. One for Harry to ponder, perhaps, as he considers his future within the royal family. Now, Tom Sykes of The Royalist has done some of his own reporting based on Sarah Vine's piece, going to both the Sussexes and Sarah Vine. I want to take you through what he has revealed on his Royalist Substack. He writes, when I went to Meghan's side for reaction, there was no on-the-record comment. But their side have made it pretty clear they regard articles like this as hateful. And that word was in quotation, hateful. So clearly they are just dismissing this as hateful rhetoric from Sarah Vine rather than actually dealing with the truth about, well, did this happen? Which is surely the most important thing. Is it true? And so Tom Sykes says he messaged Sarah Vine. And he asked her, why write about them at all? And Sarah replied, because she and they are culturally significant, because the last 10 years have reshaped the royal family, because they have put themselves at the center of the conversation through their actions. And then specifically when he challenged her on this Sussex concept of her reporting being hateful, Sarah Vine replied, the idea that no one is allowed to make any kind of considered assessment of their behavior is in itself incredibly arrogant. People are judged by their actions. And by the way, there is no hate in that piece. And I've read the full piece. I actually agree with Sarah Vine on this. It was a very, very moderate piece. And she says, I've actually had many emails today saying I've been far too soft. I've just tried to be fair, to assess the situation based on the facts and their own actions. You cannot deny reality. They did what they did. But what I've tried to do is put them in a wider cultural context. And Tom Sykes then reminds us of his own reporting for the Daily Beast in 2024, which had former staff calling Meghan a demon with psycho moments. A florist screamed at down the phone for half an hour over a bouquet. And of course, the paper trail, her own press secretary, Jason Knauf's 2018 email saying she had bullied 2 PAs out of the royal household. Sykes says the bigger point is that after Harry's court defeat, the Sussexes can't sue the Mail, the palace won't defend them, and Hollywood doesn't need them. Which, Brittany, is quite a damning indictment, right, of where they find themselves 10 years after entering the public domain.
It really is, Dan. I think Tom Sykes' assessment there is flawless, especially when it comes to Hollywood. Hollywood doesn't need Harry and Meghan. They got their pound of flesh from them. They're done. The palace won't defend them. And they don't really have a shield anymore because, calling comments hateful or racist is no longer working because people see through this. You can't have such a long track record as Meghan does of bullying allegations without everybody believing that there has to be some truth to them, regardless of what Harry and Meghan and their team are saying here. And so I think Harry and Meghan very much find themselves on their own isolated little island, but they did it to themselves. They did not treat people well. They did not treat the palace well. They did not treat staff well. They didn't treat their own families well. And you shouldn't be surprised if after a while you have no more defenders. And that's the case for Harry and Meghan. Basically, they have themselves in the Sussex squad, and that's about it at this point. Netflix doesn't have a strong investment in them. And so Netflix is fully willing to throw them to the wolves, as we saw with Variety earlier this year, I believe it was. And then we've had the piece in the Hollywood Reporter. So basically, the glasses are gone. We can all see Harry and Meghan for who they are. Harry and Meghan, though, just can't seem to accept that. That's why Meghan constantly lies. She constantly exaggerates. She constantly is trying to craft a narrative because she desperately doesn't want us to see the real her, even though we've all seen through her in some cases this entire time. She's not fooling anyone except for the gullible. And so she needs to give up this holier than thou act. It doesn't work at all. I think it makes her to the public look even worse, but she can't help herself because she has this incessant need for control and to look perfect and gracious and all these things. And so all of this stuff battles and you just end up with an absolute mess and toxicity and chaos, which has not served Harry and Meghan very well, especially in the last year or two.
Well, of course. And what I think is interesting too about Sarah Vine going back before her time entering the royal family, though, Brittany, is that it proves what I have been saying for a very, very long time, that this was not Meghan entering an institution that didn't treat her right, and that's why everything failed, which is something that in the past has been argued perhaps convincingly about the British royal family if you look at perhaps Princess Diana or Sarah Ferguson or even Catherine, the Princess of Wales. No, this was a woman who knew exactly what she wanted, who knew exactly how to get it, and had a long track record of treating people who were actually giving her a lot of free stuff and providing her with a brilliant lifestyle like a piece of dirt. And so, of course, that behavior just translated when she entered into the royal family, because we know from her own words that she didn't really see any difference between Hollywood and the British royal family. Or put it this way, she certainly didn't respect, Brittany, the different traditions of the royal family. I mean, we saw it in that famous scene in the Harry and Meghan documentary, which I think will haunt her for the rest of her days, where she's, mocking the fact that she had to curtsy for the Queen. Like, come on. Like, what did you expect? And so as a result, Brittany, my contention is that actually that bad behavior was so ingrained from day one. And the British royal family were actually quite restrained to keep all of it private and keep all of it under wraps until I actually blew the whistle on the fact that it was the Queen, the late Queen, and Catherine who had just said enough. And it was specifically, well, there were the two stories specifically. Obviously, the Queen one was in regards to the tiara and all of Meghan's demands before the wedding. But with Catherine, it was very different, Brittany. It was about how she was communicating to the staff members at Kensington Palace.
I mean, then you have to go back, even in Tom Bower's book about Meghan, she just had an ego from the jump. She had the minorest of minor successes, and her ego grew 10 times. And so to get into the royal family, her ego blew into the stratosphere. But you really have to look at how quickly she and Harry left is, I think, a very much a reflection on who Meghan actually is, which is that she wanted the money. She was only ever after the money. Harry was a means to an end. And then when she found out that actually the royal family is not cash rich, this is pretty consistent across most of the royal families, is that they're not necessarily cash rich. They're just rich in land and art and jewelry and these sorts of things. And so Meghan found out, hey, I'm only given like £2 million a year. That is not enough for Meghan Markle. And so that preceded this jump over to the US to try to make as much money as possible, because that was always what was driving her, was the money. And Meghan's character, of course, she very much comes across as a mean girl. One of the more interesting anecdotes, actually, one of my followers shared with me, is that when it came to that bit in Harry's book talking about Meghan asking Catherine for her lip gloss before an event, it's actually an actress ploy to throw other women who are auditioning for the same role off their game. And so Meghan was utilizing those things before she even officially married Harry, because I think that was before their wedding, that she was trying to manipulate things, throw Catherine off her game. I mean, Meghan came into the royal family absolutely with an agenda. She did not care to conform. She did not care to learn. She just wanted cash. And she was willing to play the game for a hot second. But as soon as it became too difficult, as soon as people were like, we see through you, because the reality is the scrutiny of a royal is so much harder than it is on the scrutiny of celebrities. You are evaluated so differently as a royal than as a celebrity. Meghan couldn't handle that, so she jumped ship. She maybe made some money for a hot second, but things are sort of definitely collapsing around them now, and it's not a surprise. She has not treated people well, and that always comes back to bite you.
Yeah, just too many anecdotes now, right? Too many. Brittany, we got some interesting developments over the weekend. It looks like Edoardo Mappali Mozzi, otherwise known as Edo, Princess Beatrice's husband since 2020, is finally attempting to clap back using visuals, which is a royal thing to do, about the fears that the marriage has been in a bit of trouble. I mean, we do remember that he made those comments to Charlotte Griffiths in the Mail on Sunday, which was very much like, well, I'm traveling. Of course I'm traveling. I'm putting my business first. But this was a big tribute for Beatrice's birthday, and it did seem to have the desired effect, with Sabera Lone writing pictures taken by Edo of Princess Beatrice for her birthday today from Hello on Instagram. And according to Taz writing, well, I think Princess Beatrice looks very pretty and I hope she had a nice birthday. I personally do not like the witch hunt that surrounds the York princesses. They are not their parents, and it's never been proved that they actually did something wrong. And so I do think we are going to start seeing a bit more of this, Brittany. Like, obviously it's difficult for them because they don't know when there are going to be more stories coming about Andrew, or, for example, it's gone very quiet, hasn't it, on the police front. And I know Andrew Lowney, the author of Entitled, doesn't expect that Andrew actually will be charged. But remember, there are other investigations ongoing. So it's very difficult for both York girls because, of course, at any point, there could be a new story about Andrew, which makes their attempt for public rehabilitation difficult. Because at that stage, if Edo were to post pictures like that, it would feel quite uncomfortable. So I do appreciate they're in a very difficult PR situation, but did you feel like Edo's post will do enough to shut down the rumours that the marriage has been in a bit of trouble? Because I think what has been undeniable, Brittany, is that Beatrice has been deeply, deeply unhappy, and you can't really blame her given everything that she has had to go through. And by the way, that is also not, I sort of take the other stance, like I'm not excusing her of not doing anything wrong. I think she did make mistakes, but at the same time, it's a very emotionally difficult situation that she's in.
I mean, I definitely feel for these girls. They have to navigate just an absolute PR minefield in this instance, Stan. And that has to be difficult on a marriage. I don't think there's any denying that both marriages probably are under some strain because of this. And I would argue Beatrice's in particular, because she was very close. Obviously, she was part of the Nightline interview. She was part of that prep. She has been very close with her parents. And while I think there's something admirable to say that despite all that her parents have done, that she maintained a good relationship with them. I mean, it has been stressed to the max. She has tried to obviously somewhat be there for them. And then it feels like at every moment she has been kind of betrayed. And I can't help but think that some of this has spilled over into her marriage. So I hope they are able to stay strong through this. Of course, I don't think that the pictures will totally dissuade people, because you can have pictures or no pictures and people still talk. So it's not going to totally dismiss it, but I hope that they're able to work through this. But this is a difficult time. They really have to navigate some very uncharted territory here, because they are the children of their parents. So they had a relationship with them. Of course, they've been dragged into so much of this Epstein stuff, and some of it, maybe they are guilty of something, maybe they are not, but we don't have firm evidence on either side here. And so they're living in this state of kind of limbo. And so one of the things that they could do if they wanted to is maybe give up the princess titles and just kind of go more casual. That might help them navigate and put off the press scrutiny maybe a bit. But I do hope, of course, that both marriages stay strong, remain strong for the sake of the children and everything, and that they are working through this. But this is definitely not an easy time for them. And I'm sure there's a lot of soul searching and figuring out, hey, what does the future hold? Because it's looking a heck of a lot more uncertain than it was even a year or two ago for the York girls. So wishing Beatrice and her husband all the best.
And Brittany reports that Fergie flew into Portugal over the weekend to see her new granddaughter, obviously Eugenie just given birth. And again, this is going to be incredibly difficult to navigate, isn't it? Given she has tried to completely disappear from public view, but it is natural that she is going to want to see her new grandchild. Obviously, at this point, no visit by Andrew, but we don't know if that will come or not. I mean, he has traveled.
We don't know, but I think it's great that Fergie is going to spend time with her daughter and her new granddaughter. I think that's exactly where she should be in this particular instance. And what's been so odd is such like the Sarah and Andrew have such an odd dynamic, because the girls seem fairly well adjusted overall, and they count them as good parents. The girls, they count their parents as good parents, and yet you have all this Epstein crud and everything. So the challenge always is, I think, for Sarah in particular, is that she can have these great moments of, I think, being a parent and being engaged, and then she also is just desperate to grab cash. And so that's always, I think, the dynamic that the girls have to deal with when it comes to their mother, is her incessant need to make money and her continued losing of massive amounts of money. And so that is what the girls, I think, in this particular instance have to navigate. But I think a grandmother spending time with her daughter and granddaughter is of course, no issues at all there. I'm sure she's helping out with the boys too. So I think that's a great place for Sarah to be. And so wishing obviously the best to this new little addition to the royal family. But the Yorks definitely have a long road ahead of them if they're even going to attempt a somewhat rehabilitation in the future.
Do you think people would accept, Brittany, if Eugenie did want Andrew to come and visit his new granddaughter? Beatrice got a lot of criticism, didn't she, when she was seen taking her children to ride with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It was in Windsor at that point. And since then, there has been the suggestion that he hasn't seen either of his daughters or any of his grandchildren.
I mean, I am of the opinion of, when it comes to the royal family, I think there should be a separation between what is dynastic and what is family. That line needs to sometimes be very carefully walked. But a grandfather wanting to see his grandchildren, I think, is perfectly natural, just as in the case of King Charles. And so if Andrew wanted to go and visit, I don't really see an issue with that. I don't see why anybody should see an issue with that. Obviously, it may be best for PR reasons for Andrew and Sarah not to be in the same place at the same time at this point. That might be a suggestion, but him going to visit if he wants to, I think that's great. Although we have heard as well that particularly Beatrice isn't really talking to her parents. And I think there has been a lot of separation between the girls and Sarah and Andrew. And we understand why, but it's hard to see a strong family unit, because the Yorks were a pretty strong family unit for many, many years, be so fractured. And they really only have their parents to blame for this. Their parents made a lot of catastrophically bad decisions. But I think either way, it is still hard to see such a faltering of relationships. But that is sometimes what happens when you make very bad decisions.
Brittany, editor of the Royal News Network, covers this all on her own brilliant channel, as well as monarchies across the world. You can subscribe to her by looking for the Royal News Network, RNN, on both YouTube and X. But so great to have you on Outspoken today, Brittany. And of course, I also recommend, thank you, Brittany, that you...
This video is for news reporting, commentary, and educational purposes. The views expressed are based on publicly available information and personal analysis. We strive for accuracy but encourage viewers to verify information through official sources.